Next winter, Shohei Ohtani will become a free agent, giving teams the opportunity to sign a player who could not only be their ace, but also be the best hitter in their lineup. This is what Steve Cohen has been waiting for, a superstar that could not only be as marketable as they come, but a guy that can lead the Mets to multiple championships. Should all of their eggs be in the Shohei Ohtani basket? We're going to discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Now, Shohei Ohtani's sweepstakes are beginning a little bit early, at least on Locked On Mets. Throughout this week, I will be breaking down each aspect to the Shohei Ohtani story. Today, we're looking at more of a grand scale, and then we're going to refine that down. I'm going to talk about the contract that he could command, how much money is he worth. We're going to get to more of a statistical aspect of this on tomorrow's show, and then we'll close that out with what scenario could unfold where Ohtani could be on the Mets roster this year. Would they even consider trading for him at the deadline if things fell apart in Anaheim? But all of that for a later date. For now, let's just look at the idea of this, the framework, the opportunity that will be presented to the Mets after this season. Yes, you look at the scope of free agency. The Mets were just in the running to get Carlos Correa. Now that money is free to be spent elsewhere. That you think they can add another big contract on the books. And Manny Machado is the best possible replacement for what you thought you'd get in Correa. A guy that can be a Gold Glove winning third baseman who's an awesome hitter. That's a great player that the Mets should absolutely be in on. Of course. Shohei Ohtani is a different level, and it's an opportunity that it's almost hard to pass on if you're the New York Mets, because yes, Machado is amazing, but you know what? There's Rafael Devers, who's a great third baseman who just re-signed with the Red Sox. You have Nolan Arenado in St. Louis. You have Correa, who could have been a third baseman. You have Jose Ramirez. Now, all these guys aren't going to be available right away or even at any time. A lot of them are locked up. But my point is, there's a lot of great third basemen in baseball. Hell, Brett Baty might become one for you, homegrown and cheap. How many multi-way players are there in the game? There's one unicorn named Shohei Ohtani. He's the only one like it. And you could say, all right, well, this contract's going to start at $500 million. He could be making $50 million a year. Is he going to be worth it? Look, on tomorrow's show, as I said, we'll iron that out. We'll really dive into what's the value of a player like Ohtani. Like, what's the average season you can expect throughout a contract, and how much is that really worth a team? But here's just the short of it. Here's a snippet of what a player like this could be worth. Carlos Rodon just signed a contract as a top-tier free agent starting pitcher who was able to get a 6-year deal. Now, I think that Ohtani might be a better pitcher than Rodon, but off the season that Rodon had, you could say there's a comp there. He's making $27 million with the New York Yankees per season on that 6-year deal. Now, Yordan Alvarez just got a pre-arb deal as a DH. So he didn't have the leverage that a free agent DH would have, but he still is the best DH in baseball. He got a contract with the Astros that's paying him a little bit north of $19 million a season. Combine those two numbers, you're at $46 million. With the leverage that Ohtani has, $50 million a season is not crazy, but it's also not overpriced because he is filling two roles on your team with one roster spot and doing it at a luxury of being such a novelty that the money he brings into your franchise is astronomical. It's almost like the NBA, where no matter what the max NBA contract is, a LeBron James is so valuable to your franchise that it literally swings how much your franchise is worth by maybe as much as $1 billion. If you really think about just ticket sales and jerseys and eyeballs on your team and watching games on TV, everything else. Shohei Ohtani pitching every 5 or 6 games and being in the starting lineup as your DH, that will put butts in seats and eyes on TVs for your ball club. It will sell jerseys, and you have a chance to win in a big way. And as much as we can play up the whole, hey, if he came to New York, he'd be a bigger star, which I think there is some level to that, right? There's an East Coast bias, and maybe stars shine a little bit brighter on a Yankees or a Mets star than a Dodgers or an Angels star, particularly an Angels one. But the biggest part of that, the biggest component, is the winning. I mean, there's a reason why the Dodgers and the Yankees have marketable superstars, because on top of having the superstar player, those superstar players are cogs in winning machines that every single year find themselves in October competing to win division titles. I think the only thing that has maybe held Ohtani back a bit from really fulfilling his prophecy of being the most marketable star in baseball, and he might be there already. I mean, he's still out in the forefront a lot. It was really him and Tatis going into last year. I think Aaron Judge now is probably the face of baseball for this moment in time. But you put Ohtani on a winner in New York City, and that is the new heart of baseball. That is where you start. That is the face of the game. If you can buy that as Steve Cohen early on into your tenure as an owner and make the Mets a perennial winner, is there really a dollar amount that is not worth it for Shohei Ohtani? And on top of that, let's look at baseball history. That's where to get into more next. Babe Ruth goes to the Yankees, who had never won a World Series. We know about the curse. They get him. He puts them on the map in a way that is remarkable and transpired into a history that Mets fans hate to think about. Shohei Ohtani could be the Mets' Babe Ruth, but in some ways better. I'm going to explain that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they are the #1 sportsbook in America. That is FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all of your favorite bets, from the money line to the point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first ever $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Is Shohei Ohtani better than Babe Ruth? In some aspects, yes. When it comes to being a two-way player, he has already surpassed what Babe Ruth was. Now, Ruth was incredible, okay? You want to call him the greatest player in baseball history, you can. He did have a 2.28 career ERA. He did hit 714 home runs. Amazing. But if we really break it down, yes, Ruth had 147 big league starts, but in 15 years with the Yankees, he only pitched 31 innings. So that two-way stuff, it died before he got to New York. They purchased him to be a slugger, and obviously there's the history about the curse. You can talk about that more on a Yankees or Red Sox podcast. He wins titles 15, 16, and 18 with the Red Sox, gets sold out to the Yankees in 20, and then they win in 23, 27, 28, 32, and then all the championships. Whatever. Who cares about that? Bottom line is they became the Yankees when they got Babe Ruth. The Mets could become whatever the new Mets are once they get Ohtani, assuming, of course, they don't just become that a year early and win without him. But you look at Babe Ruth's history as a two-way player. He really didn't start pitching and hitting with a consistency until 1918, when he played 95 games, hit 11 home runs, which was at the time a league best mark, drove in 61, got over 300 plate appearances. That same year, he pitched to a 2.22 ERA and 166 and a third innings pitched. Now, you look at the 2 years prior, he had pitched over 300 innings. So, different era, different times. Guys would start 40 times a season. They would just pitch to contact and go as long as they could. I mean, his strikeout per nine for his career was in the threes. It's a completely different game. But that was the one season or one of the 2 seasons, if you look at 1918, where he did both. And then he started phasing out of pitching even more in 1919, 133 and a third innings pitched, 2.97 ERA, but led the league with 29 home runs, 113 RBIs, was a full-time hitter. You go to the Yankees, and that was basically the shift for him. He became a hitter, not a pitcher anymore, and he went on to have a Hall of Fame career. Maybe he has as a pitcher too. We will never know. Obviously, it doesn't matter. You put him together. He's one of the greatest players to ever live. Shohei Ohtani is trying to do it all at once, and we got a taste of it when he was a rookie, 10 starts where he was great both ways, but then needed Tommy John, waited for the season to finish, finished out the year, won the Rookie of the Year, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. I'm positive he did. Gets to Tommy John. We don't see him really pitch again. He has a glimpse in 2020, but finally in 2021 is when we saw Ohtani the pitcher and Ohtani the hitter. And this past season, I think we saw Ohtani's becoming an even more valuable pitcher than he is a hitter. He pitched to a 2.33 ERA, got better as the season progressed. Really, there was a stretch, past the trade deadline leading, towards the end of the season where you could have made the argument he was the best pitcher in baseball the way he was throwing it. I mean, he is so talented with his arm, 219 strikeouts. That really is, I think, moving forward, what you're looking at, signing an ace. But you also add 34 home runs, a 142 WRC plus. So remember, that is weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters based on a league average of 100. So a 142 WRC plus means he was 42% better than your league average hitter. He had a 5.6 F4 as a pitcher, so he was worth about 5.5 wins, and a 3.8 F4 as a hitter, so almost 4. You put it together, he's worth nearly 10 wins, 9.4. That is the second most valuable player in baseball this past season to Aaron Judge. That's why he didn't win the award. But projecting forward, should be the most valuable player in baseball, because what we saw in 2021 as far as consistency is concerned is a guy that still went out, pitched to, was like a low 3 ERA, put up a 3 F4, and as a hitter, put up a 5 F4, and had WRC plus over 150. So what he can bring to a ball club as a pitcher, as a hitter, the Babe Ruth element of this, where it's just the idea of acquiring this player that is just destined to be the face of the league if he's not already, that's where you have to look. That is the opportunity in front of you. And you look at the teams who are even able to get into this mix. The Dodgers would love to make a run at Ohtani. That's probably why they might do all the cap gymnastics in the world to reset themselves this year on the luxury tax. The Yankees could absolutely be in on Shohei because they obviously are always in the market for superstars, and this is the type of superstar where they just can't afford to not pursue. Like, their fan base will just want them at least in the mix. Who else, though, can really get in the ball game here financially? The Angels will obviously want to retain him, but it's really on them to have a winning season. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like they have a choice, and we'll see if they trade him at the deadline. That's a conversation for another day this week. The New York Mets have to be one of the favorites to land Shohei Ohtani, and you really have to think that that is where their focus should lie. They have Billy Epler, the same GM that signed him originally. Can he pull it off twice with an even bigger budget behind him with Steve Cohen? I think it's possible. And if they do that, how does this set up the team going into the future? Well, Shohei Ohtani serves as the best utility player in baseball, a guy that can serve multiple functions on your roster. To have an ace and a cleanup hitter, you love that. I'm going to explain what that'll look like in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Shohei Ohtani's utility on the New York Mets. This is just the idea of how he can, for one, slot into your lineup and also could headline your rotation for years to come. When you look at the Mets rotation right now, the only piece that is possibly on the books beyond the next 3 years is Kodai Senga, and he has an opt-out. So that's a whole other element. 2 Japanese pitchers on the same team. The Shohei want to be with another Japanese star. There was a whole thing when he first came over about he only wanted to play on the star where he was, or on a team where he was the only Japanese star. I don't think that is a big story to follow. The Mets are the highest bidder, and they're a team that gives him an opportunity to win every year. I think they have a great chance to sign this guy, particularly with Billy Epler again in those conversations. But if the Mets were to sign Ohtani, what does it look like? Well, for your rotation, you would still have another year, hopefully, assuming Scherzer doesn't opt out, of Scherzer, Verlander, and then all of a sudden it's what? Senga and Ohtani, or Ohtani obviously over Senga. Ohtani by that point could even be the ace of that staff. You'd still have David Peterson. You still have Jose Quintana. I mean, you basically replacing Carlos Carrasco from this current rotation with Shohei Ohtani. That's basically the breakdown of it. That's insane, okay? You then look at the starting lineup. Right now, if you're looking at the starting lineup at 2024, Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha fall off it. So it's Brandon Nimmo in center. Jeff McNeil, at some point, please tell me he's going to bat in the top 3 as your best hitter, I hope. So we're going to put him in batting second, playing second. Lindor at shortstop. Alonso cleanup. Shohei Ohtani could bat 5th on this team as your everyday DH. You got Alvarez at that point would establish himself likely as the starting catcher. If not him, Kevin Parada. Brett Beatty at third base potentially if he can establish himself. Starling Marte still under contract for 2 years beyond the 2023 season. So him in right field, suddenly the only starting spot in your lineup you'd have to fill is left. Whether that is Ronnie Mauricio or Mark Vientos, which I don't think is necessarily likely, particularly Vientos being able to field a position out there. Mauricio, it's a possibility, but kind of looking at what you would do, and you have the prospect capital of Mauricio, Vientos, even a Kevin Parada to address that position. You still have free agency if you had to. There's ways the Mets could plug in an outfielder, not to mention Alex Ramirez coming through the pipeline could potentially become your starting center fielder, pushing Nimmo into left. Don't think that happens in 2024, but 2025, a realistic possibility as you continue to forecast your team. If you extend Jeff McNeil and Pete Alonso and sign Shohei Ohtani, man, you can accent this roster with prospects galore throughout the next decade and always have a winner with the core that would be in place with Lindor, McNeil, Alonso, Nimmo locked up to contracts that are maybe a little bit more team-friendly. Lindor, obviously not quite in that conversation. And then having Ohtani on the books. Even if you look beyond that and you try to think about who would you rather pay, Pete Alonso or Shohei Ohtani, as much as I love Pete and I think he absolutely needs to be a forever Met, you can certainly make an argument that you can plug first base, and spending money on a bat, Ohtani would be the bat that you'd rather spend money on because he's also an ace pitcher. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the New York Mets, and the Angels have to screw it up first, so that's obviously the elephant in the room. The Angels are awesome, just like they've been able to retain Mike Trout. They can retain Ohtani, and that could eventually become a team that is worth something in baseball with those two guys. They have failed them up to this point, though, and if they fail them again this year, this could become the biggest story in sports. Now, as I mentioned, this is Shohei Ohtani week. On the show for Wednesday, we are breaking down how much money Ohtani is worth, and then we're going to close this conversation on Thursday with what circumstance would have to happen for the Mets to go all in and trade for Ohtani this year as a rental, and what would that type of a package look like? Would that be worth it for the Mets, or should all their planning around Ohtani just lie in him hitting free agency? Again, we got the whole week to discuss this. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. This is where you want to go to learn about the starts of tomorrow. You follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.